Community-centered, community-supported. Alaska Public Media. Alaska Insight is supported in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by viewers just like you. Thank you.
Alaskans are keenly aware of our outsized dependence on food shipments to keep store shelves filled. But some Alaskans are on a mission to create more local supplies.
I think our answer to our food insecurity issues are right in our own backyard. We need to have as many home gardens as possible so we can get back to sharing together, growing more food locally that's healthy.
We'll discuss how to get started if you're new to gardening, tips for growing in small spaces, and learn about the importance of seed libraries right now on Alaska Insight. Good evening. Tonight we'll hear about how Alaska's growing season has changed through the decades and what that means for growing more local food for a healthy supply and stability. But before we get to that discussion, we'll start off with some of the top stories of the week from Alaska Public Media's collaborative statewide news network. A Wasilla man sentenced for storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, is asking a judge to loosen the conditions of his probation. 43-year-old Aaron James Miller was sentenced by a federal judge to 2 years of probation last month for demonstrating in the Capitol building. 3 other charges were dismissed in exchange for the guilty plea. Not possessing firearms was a condition of the probation, but now Miller is asking to be allowed a firearm to protect himself from moose. Federal prosecutors opposed the request, saying Miller lives in a suburb where moose rarely need to be shot in self-defense. A federal judge ruled on Monday that ConocoPhillips can begin construction immediately on its Willow project in the Western Arctic, denying requests for an injunction. Environmental groups and local residents who oppose the project filed 2 lawsuits last month, claiming the decision to allow ConocoPhillips to develop its leases in the National Petroleum Reserve went against environmental laws. Those cases are still pending, but U.S. District Court Judge Sharon Gleason has declined to stop work in the meantime. Left-of-center candidates are leading in 6 out of 7 Anchorage Assembly races after voting ended in the municipal election on Tuesday. The initial batch of unofficial results, while not decisive, reflect around 43% of last year's turnout for the election. Tens of thousands of ballots still need to be counted. However, 3 left-leaning candidates, Chris Constant in North Anchorage, Anna Brawley in West Anchorage, and Karen Bronga in East Anchorage, all lead by more than 20 points. School board incumbents Dave Donnelly and Andy Holloman also appear to be on track to keep their seats, and many bonds, including the school bond, are likely to pass. You can find the full versions of these stories and many more on our website, alaskapublic.org, or by downloading the Alaska Public Media app on your phone. Now on to our topic for tonight, seeing how much Alaska relies on imports for food and gardening, Melina Savigny asked herself, how could she help Alaska's food security? She started the Mat-Su Seed Library, a shelf located in Wasilla at the Wandering Cafe, equipped with seeds acclimated to Alaska. Melina has built shelves not only in Wasilla, but also Trapper Creek, and is currently working on one in Big Lake. Alaska Public Media's Matt Fabian brings us this story from Indy, Alaska.
We are packing seeds today for the Mat-Su Seed Library. Okay, I open one. We have our amazing volunteers that help us put seeds from the big bags into the little bags. Without these folks, we wouldn't be able to keep our seed library going. So a seed library's focus and intention is to distribute seeds to as many people as possible. And over time, a seed library's catalog of seeds will include locally adapted varieties of plants that have been grown out by Seed Library members that are acclimated to the climate in which you live. One of the things that you'll see in those library cabinets are varieties that you aren't going to find at the Fred Meyer or the local stores that sell seeds because they haven't been selected carefully to adapt or work with the climate that you're actually living in. I have worked with master gardeners to select open pollinated varieties that will work in your garden at home. My parents gardened growing up in Texas. I remember learning how to canned food and jellies. It just always tasted so much better than what you get at the store. And it became a family environment whenever we did all those activities. And when I had children, I wanted to pass that on to them.
Yep. So brother's got it in there?
I moved up here with my family in 2015 and was shocked when it came to gardening. I had to relearn everything all over again. Certain varieties, are very sensitive to the long daylight that we have, and of course we've got a very short growing season up in Alaska. Most of the things that I was used to growing don't even grow up here unless you have a greenhouse. At the beginning of COVID, seed companies started shutting off orders. We are already in a pretty volatile situation here in Alaska where 95, sometimes the statistics say 98% of our food is shipped up that we eat in Alaska. We can't afford to have our seed supplies cut off like that. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. From there, the Seed Library was born. Time went on, we started meeting at the senior center in Wasilla, and recently we've been having homeschool kids come in. So we have the aspect of the elders and the children coming in together. It really became a sense of a family and a community, talking about gardening and learning about what they did in their life growing up and what kind of gardens they had. And so it's just been a really amazing experience to bring the elders teaching the children.
Did you plant your Brussels sprouts yet?
I feel passionate about this because I think our answer to our food insecurity issues are right in our own backyard. We need to have as many home gardens as possible so we can get back to sharing together, growing more food locally that's healthy, building communities by just simply starting something in your backyard. It could even be some lettuce on your porch. There's a sense of empowerment and pride that we have when we can grow our own food, and I want to share that. One seed at a time.
So much to love about that story, one seed at a time indeed. Joining me tonight to discuss gardening and all that goes into it is Debbie Hinchey, a longtime Anchorage horticulturist, and Will Kreiner, the garden facilities manager at the Alaska Botanical Garden. Welcome, both of you. I'm so excited to have you here. I have to admit my bias because I grew up in farm and gardening families, and we always had, we grew a lot of our own food and even raised things to sell sometimes. And so I still like gardening, although it's different in an urban environment, as you both know so well. So before we start talking about gardening, I wanted to note that we have some proof that things from seeds can take off. Debbie's brought us some new seedlings. Tell us a little bit about these varieties.
Well, I actually saved the seeds myself, much like the video, and this little micro tomato only gets about a foot tall, about a foot wide, so it's ideal for small gardens or windowsills. And they're still cherry tomato sized, but they're just. And another thing, by putting them in a container, when it starts to get cold, you can bring them inside. And depends on how much light they're given. It could be November and December. They're still getting tomatoes. So, micro. I love these little micro tomatoes. Mm-hmm. And I've been saving the seed for about 5 years. They were varieties that I bought, and then I got the tags mixed up, and so I don't know what variety they are or if it's a combination, but for 5 years, they've been producing tomatoes, so that's what's important. And
it's
this
kind of your own variety by now.
Yes, so it's become, it might have been a hybrid, but it's an heirloom now. And then Better Bush is one that I bought as a tomato plant last year. It's sort of well, actually it's got pretty good sized tomatoes, but I technically am more of a small tomato grower because there's so much can happen to a big tomato. It takes a long time to ripen, and then I easily forget to water it or falls over or something. And so by the time I wait that long and then I have something go wrong, it's disappointing.
Sure.
So I just do cherries. They're faster.
Yeah, yeah.
So bitter bush is a bigger one, but it's a determinate, and so it only gets about 4 feet tall and wide. And I grow them in a container, and I do not have a greenhouse either. And this one is Sun Gold, and it is advertised as a F1 hybrid, which would be the new cross is made every year. But I've heard that people have gotten it to come true from seed. So I'm trying it. And so it's kind of an experiment. And the other 3 varieties are much taller right now.
So fun. Thank you for bringing those. Let's talk a little bit about how the season has changed here in Alaska through the decades. And Debbie, I want to stay with you for just a minute. The changes you described between now and the 1970s, talk about how that season has stretched from a time when the killing frost was in August until now October, and what that really means. And then Will, I'd like you to pick it up there too.
Yes, it has definitely changed. When I first started gardening, I think this is my 50th year as a horticulturalist, and yeah, the growing season was June, July, and August, and that was it. And the killing frost could come anywhere late August. And the Anchorage Garden Club has a flower show every year, and I think it's like 70, getting close to 80 years they've had this flower show. It's always the first full weekend of August, and it's called the Fall Flower Show. And so because early August was getting ready for fall at the time. So it's been drastic change, and I'm kind of working that's almost extended a month on each end, almost, and sometimes it's, you know, a little bit more. Some things like snapdragons can take a frost, and so they can go outside sooner, and marigolds definitely not. But it's changed.
So much change. Will, you mentioned the differences in seasons between the lower 48 and Alaska, and you know, the intensity here as opposed to places that actually have 4 distinct seasons. Talk about what that means in terms of how Alaskans need to get ready, because when it's go time, you gotta go.
Yeah, the season is short. They used to say 100 days frost to frost, but now we're seeing 130 or more, but that's still a short season when you consider things like tomatoes that need 100 days to mature and to produce fruit. So that means that Alaskans have to start a little earlier, often indoors, because we don't have the nice warm climate outside. So we start our plants early, so planting early and getting things like tomatoes started and long season stuff started early is a great thing to do. And yeah.
Yeah, and so the zones themselves, there's several in Anchorage. Anchorage is a zone 3, Turnagain is a zone 4, Hillside
Sure.
zone 2. But Debbie, you had also mentioned that the zones aren't very accurate for Alaska, that there's a zone on along the coast for South Central that extends almost all the way up to Utqiagvik, which
Yes, the
clearly is a different zone.
Right. The USDA charts just aren't quite right, and they're supposedly based on low temperatures. Whatever they're based on, it's not true. That
And do they not update them? I mean, is there
it was updated, and I was hopeful, and it's a little bit better, but it's still pretty far off. And so you just have to know on your own experience or experienced gardeners in your area. And the zones are kind of a borderline anyway to tell you if something's zone 8, it's definitely not going to make it in any part of Alaska.
Sure.
Maybe, depends on what it is, maybe southeast, further south. But it gives you a ballpark that if it can grow in a zone 2 or 3, then it certainly should grow in your warmer area. And I live in West Anchorage, and it's more like a zone 4.
You
little
talked
pockets.
about zone denial, how people push, you know, trying to grow things in a zone that maybe they can't. And I wondered if maybe I hadn't done that because I bought some pear trees a few years ago. from one of the local growers and said, really pears? And they said, well, we try to only stock what we think can survive here and not frustrate our customers. I had pears the first year. I get blossoms, but no fruit now. So I don't know if it's a seasonal thing, a zone thing, or pollination, but enough of my problems. For someone new to planting, if they've just moved into a home, maybe for the first time with a backyard, how should they start? Should they consider tilling up a section of their yard, or should they start with containers and raised beds? What do you recommend?
Yeah, when you have a home, and it's sometimes people buy homes in the winter and they haven't seen their yard at all and they have no idea what's there. So finding out what's there, finding a friend or someone who knows who can identify some plants, seeing what areas work good, like what areas you have in full sun versus shade. And it really depends on what you're wanting to do. If you want flowers or if you want vegetables or other things, raised beds are a great option. There's also lasagna gardening, so you don't necessarily have to rototill. You can put cardboard down and then build up with waste materials like leaves and grass clippings and things, and kind of create a compost pile that will then decompose and turn into nice garden soil. And then that way you don't have to dig into the soil, and then you're not going to be bringing up all these weed seeds and other things that you're going to be fighting forever. So you're going to put cardboard down, and then you're going to build up compost and nice soil on top of that. That's going to be pretty weed free because it's not actual soil that you're putting down.
That sounds like a super simple way to get started. And I know, Debbie, you had talked about how people should look at where the warmer spots are in their yard and pay attention to that if they're new to an area.
Yes, this is a perfect time to watch where the snow melts and doesn't melt right away. Like there's one spot that I would have never thought in my life would be that warm. In fact, my husband used to put all the driveway snow on that spot, and it would still be the first place to melt. And so now I've decided to not make that. It was always the first place I had to mow, also the grass. And so now I've put down cardboard, and then I lay leaves and garden debris and chop things up and lay it, and it gets about maybe 6 inches deep, but flattened out. I don't think anybody driving by would know it was what it was. And then the following year, it seems to be composted enough and has killed the grass, and then I plant in it. And yeah, I've been doing it for 20-some years. It works.
Well, let's talk about the importance of mulch. What is good mulch, and why is it important? What do new gardeners need to know about that?
Well, I'm a firm believer in mulch. And when sometimes people think to have the garden look good, every time a leaf falls on the ground, they pick it up and throw it away or something. But I bring leaves in. Ideally, I get around to chopping them up with my mulching mower and then put them down. They're prettier that way. And when I used to work on commercial landscapes, I would do that because it looked more like bark mulch and it was acceptable. Otherwise, people thought it was too trashy looking. So it always has to look good. I've started using grass clippings as a mulch in my commercial beds on a very, very difficult spot that I was like one of my first jobs, and no wonder I got this job so easily because it was impossible. And I started using grass clippings on that, and it was day and night. It was like hiring another person because it took care of so many weeding problems, the watering problems, fertilization. And that's the other thing about mulch is I almost never fertilize because of all the organics I'm adding to the soil. I'm feeding the microorganisms and the plants that way.
Yeah. So now we have the soil ready, we have nice mulch there. Will, what should new gardeners attempt so that they don't frustrate themselves? It's easy to get overwhelmed, and especially after a long winter, we're also weary of no color, and you go and look at the lush, beautiful plants in the greenhouse and seed packets, and it's easy to get overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's at the Botanic Garden, we have a nursery, and what I want to do is for people to have success with plants. And so that's a great question, because what can you grow easily. So you really looking towards, in Alaska, we're looking at like our cool season crops, like our brassicas, so that's kale, cabbages, all these things. Onions are great. If you want a lower maintenance, herbs are a great thing to grow because fresh herbs are expensive. They can be pretty easy to grow, and they often are pretty hardy and tolerant of our climate, outdoor climate. So chives are perennial. I really like lovage. Sorrel is a perennial that can be good in salads and things, and added to soups to kind of give like a tangy flavor. So there's a lot of different stuff out there. And I would encourage people to grow plants even if they think it's a little too late, or like they're worried of like, oh, maybe these tomatoes aren't going to make it to full season, but there's value in trying things and learning lessons, because that's how all of us have learned. And I know Debbie's been gardening for 50 years, and you know, there's so much trial and error that goes into that. And so just being willing to start and take notes and learn from your mistakes.
The snow cover, in an earlier interview, you had talked, Debbie, about how the snow cover has changed and how that has caused problems for some plants. And you mentioned bleeding hearts, which I hadn't thought about in a while, but I had a number of them and now they're gone. And I talk a little bit about how that's changed with climate change and the problems that it's creating. So for people that want to start perennials, they may want to think about which ones to select.
Yeah, I think my techniques have changed a little bit. It used to be we had reliable snow cover, and when winter came, it stayed until it was finally spring. There were none of these freeze and thaws or pouring down rain in January like we're getting now. And every time it melts or rains in the wintertime, there gets to be a layer of ice, and that ice can kill the crowns of your perennials. And so I plant the perennials at soil level. I plant them a little higher than I used to. I used to always do them a little bit high, the crowns, and now I'm even more conscious of that. So if the rain comes, it'll go not on that crown and kill it. But I used to grow things that were much less hardy for our Alaska site, but that nice snow cover that kept the warmth in allowed me to do some succulents that I can't do now because of and so it's actually made it more difficult. And back to the bleeding hearts, which are very, very tough. One of my favorite landscape plants. And people that have had them for 20, 30 years suddenly have been losing them in the last decade. And it's I think it's the warmth going in, maybe the freezing of the crowns. And bleeding hearts are so tough that as soon as it starts to get warm, they start to grow, and then expecting it to be spring. And then when winter comes back, it kills it all off. And so, it's been much different. It's actually gotten harder to garden with global warming than it used to be.
Yeah, more challenges and more unknowns. Will, what are you looking at for this year that is some new varieties maybe that you're excited about?
Yeah, we have a nursery, as I said before, at the Botanic Garden, and which Debbie has been integral in starting, and that really started from, kind of collecting plants and seeds and things from the Botanical Garden and growing them and having plants available that are hardy and people will have success with. And so this year I order some plants in. We keep stuff from we divide out of the gardens and we sell those things as well. I'm excited about Britt Marie ligularia, which is people have seen the ligularias that usually have like the cordate leaf, the heart-shaped leaf, but these have a nice round leaf, and they have a little bit like more of like a daisy-like flower. We've got an aruncus, so that's a goat's beard that has like a really fine leaf texture, so almost like a ferny kind of fine leaf texture. I've also been working on growing some natives, collecting native seeds and growing and finding out what native plants work well in nursery situations, because not all native plants love being in pots in soilless medium in a nursery setting. So figuring out which ones work best in those settings.
I planted Hasscaps last year. They're sort of like a blueberry wannabe. We'll
Sure.
see how those do this
Great.
year. I hope that they come back and will do well. I want to ask in our final minute here what you would recommend for new folks about a group or a club to join. A recommendation,
I
Debbie?
belong to almost all of them, and
Give
they
us
all.
one. We
Well,
can
probably
link
the
to
Master
some, too.
Gardener Association. You do not have to be a Master Gardener to join, but there's Anchorage Garden Club and Wildflower Garden Club, and then
Great.
there's specialty ones like bonsai and orchids. And
Yeah,
you
lots of.
you just hang around gardeners all the time. I'm always learning from them
All right, and
and their plant sales.
A suggestion for you, yes, the plant sales.
Yeah,
Suggestion
so
for
you can become a member of the Alaska Botanical Garden, and that's great. And we have those gardens there, and the clubs interact with us. And then the Rock Garden Society, there's Native Plant Society, and those are great if you're interested in natives. And the Rock Garden's great because rock gardens are a great garden for Alaskans because they bloom early and then they kind of go dormant if it gets during the mid-season, so you can go fishing and do whatever.
Great.
So it's
That
really
sounds-
fun.
Thank you so much for your expertise and your help in getting us started with enthusiastic ideas for spring gardening. Gardening promotes good health both in terms of the physical activity involved and in the satisfaction of raising some of your very own fresh food or beautiful flowers. It's also an activity that can be enjoyed as a solitary endeavor or with children, family, and friends. Whether you decide to build a new garden plot this year or just plant a pot of fresh herbs, the benefits of spending time working with seeds, out in fresh air, and spring sunshine are many. That's it for this edition of Alaska Insight. Visit our website, alaskapublic.org, for breaking news and reports from our partner stations across the state. While you're there, sign up for our free daily digest so you won't miss any of Alaska's top stories of the day. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Lori Townsend. Good night.